All right, so this is a quick tutorial to demonstrate a bit about how to use the calculator that I built. So this is under Files, Help Calculators in Canvas. It's called Excel Statistical Workbook for Introductory Statistics. It has several sheets. The sheet that we are using is the worksheet called Normal, and in that it will be helpful for stuff related to chapters 5 and 6 for doing your homework. So like we discussed, there are really three types of values that you're often looking for. So you can have X scores, which are raw scores. They're the original units that you measure for something, such as height in inches or weight in pounds, or GPA in GPA points. Then you have Z, which is a standardized score. And this is when you normalize the score by subtracting the mean and dividing by the standard deviation. And then you have p-values, which are probabilities, and they are always in the form of a proportion. I can spell. So you have these three things. Now, of course, with that, then key ingredients, the distribution is defined by its mean and standard deviation. So these are really the 5 pieces of information that can be important to you. And you'll see that in this sheet, really all you deal with are means, standard deviations, X's, P's, or Z's. And so all you've got to do then to use this worksheet is to identify what you have in a given word problem and what you need to obtain. So you notice you have one that goes from Z to P. So if you have a standardized score and you want to know what the probability of obtaining that score is, you can put in the value. So for example, we can put in negative 1.9. Oh, I gotta take off my. So we can put in like 1.96. And what you'll get here is that the area left of that value is 0.975. The area right of it is 0.025. So that means, again, that's the value that only 2.5% of scores are above 1.96. And so you can just put in your z-score. So the z-score that is at the mean has 50% above and below is 0. So if we put a 0 in, you'll see that we get half on the right and half on the left. Right? So that is the way that this calculator works to go from Z to P. You can also say, well, what about from P to Z? So we could put in a P value like 0.5 and you'll get back that Z score. Notice here, 0 is the Z score that occurs at the 50th percentile in the normal distribution. Well, what score occurs at the 0.975 percentile? It's that 1.96 value we used. So this calculator can allow you to take a z-score to get a p-value. Just pay attention to if you want the left or the right area, right, or the body or the tail. The tail would be the smaller of the two values, and the body would be the larger. And here, just pay attention to the fact that you need the probability value. If you wanted a probability that was low, right, because this is cumulative, I will get the negative z-score if I put in the inverse, right, the 1 minus that value. So when I put in 0.025, I get the negative z. So this is the percentile that the score occurs at. This score occurs at the 2.5th percentile in the normal distribution. So this is how you can do z to p and p to z. And you can do the same thing if you have raw scores. You can go straight from a raw score to a p-value because it'll calculate the z for you in the process. If you do it in the book, if you have x's, you have to take x, turn it to z, then look the z up to get the p from the table in your book. Here you can just put in the information for the distribution and the value of x. So we talked about IQ. If you have a mean of 100 and a standard deviation of 15 for IQ, and you want to know what's the probability of scoring 145 on an IQ test with this distributional characteristic, turns out that only 0.001%, or excuse me, only 0.001 proportion, right, or 0.00 or 0.1%, excuse me. So 0.1% or 0.001 as a proportion score 100 above 145, right? So very high score to receive, right? We would say that's an improbable score. If you want to know the area between two values, so like how many people score between 130 and 145, we can put in another value. This second value needs to be the smaller one. So we can say how many people score between 130 and 145, and it turns out that it's just about 2%, or as a proportion, 0.02, right? That score between 130 and 145, right? Similarly, if you wanted to get an X-score from a p-value, you can just type in that information. So if I want to know what score on IQ, right? So IQ is 100 mean and SD of 15. If I want to say, well, what score is at the 75th percentile? I could put that in and find out that 110 puts you at the 75th percentile for IQ score. And so this calculator quickly allows me to go from any set of values that I might want. X to P, Z to P, P to X, P to Z. You can go all those different directions very easily just by inputting the appropriate information, which means what you have to pay attention to is simply what does the question tell you and what value does the question want you to find, right? Like any word problem, you have to make sure you understand what you've been given and what you need to obtain. So hopefully that helps you a little bit in understanding how to use this calculator that I built. Good luck.